There are stories they don't want you to hear. The Bible gives you a patriarch, a flood, and a promise, but one name was deliberately erased. The woman at the heart of the apocalypse. The secret keeper who witnessed it all. For 2,000 years, her voice has been silenced, her memory suppressed, her role reduced to a footnote. But what if her identity holds the key to understanding the entire cosmic drama of the flood? What if she was not just Noah's wife, but a living bridge between two worlds? This is the dangerous truth scrubbed from the sacred page. This is the forbidden testimony that changes everything you thought you knew about judgment, salvation, and the very structure of reality. Stay with this story. You were made for this. You open the sacred text, and there she is, a silent, unnamed ghost. Noah's wife. Ugh, that's all you get. But your soul screams the question, who was she? What name did the wind call when she stepped onto the ark? What prayers did she whisper as the last mountain vanished? The Bible is a fortress of names, genealogies, tracing every lineage with sacred precision. Yet here, at the hinge of history, at the moment when God reboots creation itself, the primary witness, the co-regent of the new world, is rendered nameless. This is not an oversight. This is a deletion, a deliberate erasure. For centuries, theologians have shrugged, scholars have called it inconsequential. But you feel the void, you sense the missing piece, and in that void, a terrifying possibility takes shape. What if her story was too powerful? What if her testimony contradicted the official narrative? The journey to find her begins now in the silence they left behind. If something in you recognizes this hunger for the whole truth, and you want me to continue bringing stories like this, let me know with a comment, and stay until the end. Your reaction tells me that this path matters to you. Because what you're about to discover isn't just a name. It's a key to a locked door, and behind that door, the world ends again. To find her, you must first step into her world, a world trembling on the edge of oblivion. Picture it, not a primitive myth, but a hyper-advanced, pre-cataclysmic civilization. The Book of Enoch whispers of a time before the flood, a golden age corrupted. Giants walked the earth. Angelic beings descended. Knowledge forbidden and sublime flowed through the veins of humanity. This was the world of the Nephilim, a fusion of heaven and earth gone terribly wrong. And into this cosmic war zone, Noah is born a righteous man in a generation of monsters, but he is not alone. He is given a wife. Who was chosen for such a man? Who was deemed worthy to carry the seed of the new world into the ark? She wasn't plucked from a crowd. Her selection was a divine strategy. She was the other half of the covenant. While Noah built the vessel, she preserved the soul of the old world. She memorized the songs. She guarded the recipes for medicines now lost. She held the stories of a humanity about to be washed away. She was the living archive. Her silence in our Bible is the first clue that her story was a threat to a simpler, more controllable narrative of sin and punishment. But the flood wasn't just about punishment, it was about preservation, and she was the preserver. The real shock is coming. What if she came from the very lineage the flood was meant to destroy? The architecture of heaven was cracking. The divine council was in uproar. The watchers had breached the barrier, mingling divine fire with mortal clay. The result was an abomination that threatened the fabric of creation itself. This is the hidden context of the flood, a celestial quarantine, a reset of a corrupted experiment. In this cosmic drama, Noah is chosen as the clean vessel for human biology. But biology is only half the equation. Culture, memory, spirit, these needed a clean vessel too. That vessel was his wife. Think of her not as a passive passenger, but as the designated keeper of the human spirit. While Noah safeguarded the genetic blueprint of creation, she safeguarded its soul. This is the invisible architecture the censors didn't want you to see. A duality, male and female, form and essence, law and wisdom. Remove one pillar, and the entire theological structure becomes unbalanced, leaning dangerously toward a God of pure wrath, absent of the nurturing, preserving feminine principle. Her erasure creates a theological monstera story of salvation told only through masculine obedience, missing the essential, preserving grace that she embodies. The ancient mystics knew this. They wrote it down, and for that their books were banned, buried, and burned. But the evidence survived, and it points to a name that will rewrite the story from its foundation. The rupture is not just in the earth, it's in the story itself. The rupture comes not with rain, but with a scream. Imagine the last day, the sky a bruised purple, the air thick with the panic of a dying world. Noah's wife stands at the gangplank, looking back at everything she must leave behind. Her family, her friends, the entire world of her childhood, now condemned. The Bible paints Noah as unwavering in his faith. But what of her faith? Did she doubt? Did she weep? Did she argue with God? The apocryphal texts scream what the canon silences. They hint at her profound trauma, her sacrifice. She wasn't just leaving a wicked world. She was leaving her world. Every memory, every sacred site, every ancestor's grave, she carried that death inside the ark. For 40 days and nights, as the screams of the drowning echoed through the hull of the world, she was the heart of that floating tomb. She comforted the animals, she fed her family, she held the light in the absolute dark. This is the untold story of the flood. Not a triumphant cruise, but a harrowing journey through the grief of God. She was the grief bearer, the one who humanized the apocalypse. To remove her is to make the flood a sterile act of divine programming. To include her is to see it as a tragedy of unimaginable scale, a divine heartbreak. And that version of God was perhaps too complex, too emotionally dangerous for the gatekeepers of doctrine. But the truth has a way of surfacing, even from the deepest waters. The aftermath reveals a secret more devastating than the flood itself. The ark grounds. The door opens on a world scrubbed clean, silent and terrifying, a blank slate. And who steps out first? Tradition says Noah. But what if the keepers of the older stories say otherwise? What if the first foot to touch the mud of the new earth was hers? The foot that carried the memory of the old world into the new. This is the moment of cosmic transfer. The responsibility is staggering. They are now the parents of all humanity. Every future sin, every future war, every future moment of love or art will flow from this couple. The weight of that rests on them both. Yet our story immediately focuses on Noah's altar, Noah's covenant, Noah's drunkenness. She vanishes again. But look closer. The first act in the new world is an act of planting. Noah plants a vineyard. Where did he get the vine? The floodwaters destroyed all vegetation. The seed had to survive the flood inside the ark. Who was the botanist? Who nurtured that fragile cutting, that handful of seeds, through the relentless darkness? It was her, the preserver, the life-giver, the entire future of human agriculture, of culture itself, for wine is culture, begins with her silent, skilled hands. And then, in the very next scene, Noah is drunk and exposed. The new world is already flawed. The corruption survived the waters because it's in the human heart. But someone witnessed this second fall. Someone covered his nakedness. The Bible says his sons did. But older, deeper traditions whisper a different truth. They whisper of her shame, her despair. The first family of the new world is already broken, and she is at the center of the fracture. But her testimony was recorded, and it survived against all odds. The primary evidence doesn't come from the Bible. It comes from the books labeled heretical and hidden away. The Book of Jubilees, part of the ancient Jewish library, dares to give her a name, Emzara. It means the strong one of the people or the mother of inheritance. This is not a casual detail. This is a theological bomb. She is named as the daughter of a man named Rachel, a descendant of the line of Seth, the righteous line. But other, even more forbidden texts, like the medieval chronicles of Jeremiah, stretch the genealogy further. They whisper she was the granddaughter of Enoch himself, the prophet who walked with God and was taken to heaven. Think about that. If true, Noah's wife carried the pure, pre-diluvian Enochian wisdom directly into the New World. She was the living link to the antediluvian mystics. She possessed knowledge of the stars, of angels, of the deep structures of creation that Noah may not have understood. This reframes everything. The ark wasn't just carrying animals. It was carrying an entire school of celestial wisdom, personified in one woman. This is the testimony they suppressed, because if salvation came through a lineage of wisdom keepers, of which she was the essential link, then the later priestly male-dominated structures of religion are built on a hidden matriarchal foundation. That is a secret that could topple empires of dogma. But there is more. A second explosive name emerges from the shadows, and it connects her to the very enemy the flood was sent to destroy. Hidden testimony gets darker, more dangerous. Some of the most suppressed legends, found in fragments and rabbinic midrash, suggest another, even more shocking name for Noah's wife, Namah. This is the dynamite, because in the Bible, Namah is named only once in the early genealogy of Cain, the murderer. She is a descendant of the cursed, violent line, a sister to Tubal-Cain, the forger of weapons. If Noah's wife is Namah, the story explodes. It means the flood did not achieve a clean genetic separation. It means the righteous line, Seth, and the cursed line, Cain, were reunited in the ark through their marriage. It means the corruption of the old world was not drowned, it was pardoned, redeemed, and brought into the new covenant through her. She becomes the symbol of divine mercy, trumping divine judgment. She is the bridge between the condemned and the saved. This is the ultimate forbidden truth. The flood wasn't a purge of the unrighteous. It was a rescue mission for a spark of light hidden within the unrighteous line. God saved the world not by destroying the wicked, but by saving the one righteous soul born from their midst. This theology is too radical, too gracious, too uncontrollable. It makes God's love bigger than his wrath. It makes salvation a matter of grace found in unexpected places, not just patriarchal lineage. This truth was a threat, so they scrubbed her name. They made her Noah's wife, a generic placeholder. They turned a cosmic matriarch, a redeemer of bloodlines, into a silent shadow. But against all odds, some preserved the truth. They became the keepers of the flame. Who preserved her name when the authorities burned the books? The mystics, the outliers. The esoteric communities living on the edges of official religion. Jewish Kabbalists, in their secretive circles, cherished the name Namah. They saw her not as a Cainite villain, but as a figure of immense spiritual power, a master of music and prophecy. They taught that her song had the power to soothe divine judgment. In Gnostic Christian circles, she was revered as a bearer of the divine Sophia, the feminine wisdom that guided Noah through the flood waters of chaos. These were underground streams of tradition, flowing beneath the monolithic structures of orthodoxy. They kept the scrolls in clay jars. They passed the names in whispers. They encoded her story in symbols, in art, in cryptic hymns. They understood that to lose her name was to lose half of God's nature in the story. They were the resistance against a flattened, monochrome history. For centuries, they guarded this secret, knowing that one day the world might be ready to hear it. That day is now. You are hearing it. You are part of that legacy of seekers. If you're realizing you're not alone in this hunger for hidden truth, write in the comments what most resonates with you and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Together we keep alive what others tried to erase. And then, centuries later, in a desert cave, something miraculous happened. The earth itself gave up the proof. Modern discovery begins with dust and fragments. 1947. The Dead Sea Scrolls are found in Qumran. Among the shattered jars and ancient parchment, scholars find multiple copies of the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees texts that had been banned, lost, or declared apocryphal for over a millennium. Here, in the most dramatic archaeological recovery in history, the world of Noah and his wife re-emerged with stunning clarity. These weren't heretical fables. They were part of the sacred library of a devout Jewish community at the time of Jesus. They took these stories as seriously as Genesis. The scrolls validated the ancient expansive context of the flood. They confirmed the Watchers, the Nephilim, the cosmic war, and in doing so, they created a space for her. If this was the real theological world of the biblical writers, then Noah's wife existed in that rich, dangerous cosmos. She wasn't an add-on, she was a central character in the original uncut version of the story. Later, scholars studying ancient Near Eastern flood myths, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Atrahasis epic found a consistent pattern. The flood hero's wife is always a crucial figure, often the voice of reason, the intervener who saves humanity. The biblical silence is the anomaly, not the norm. This scholarly consensus is a quiet bombshell. The Bible as we have it is the edited version. The director's cut, with her starring role intact, existed for centuries before being censored. What scholars are piecing together will rewrite not just her story, but the entire purpose of the flood. And this new purpose is about you. The deeper truth is a mirror. This isn't about ancient history. It's about the dual nature within you and within the cosmos. The story of Noah and his unnamed wife is the archetypal story of duality reunited, judgment and mercy, law and grace, masculine structure and feminine wisdom, the righteous line and the redeemed line. Her erasure created a spiritual schizophrenia. It gave us a faith that could often preach a God of wrath, without the balancing God of compassionate preservation. It created hierarchies that suppressed the feminine, intuitive, preserving wisdom essential for navigating the floods of life. Finding her restores the balance. It says that to survive the apocalypses in your own life, the grief, the loss, the chaos, you need both. You need Noah's obedient action, build the ark. But you also need Emzara's preserving heart. Carry the memories, tend the seeds, hold the light in the darkness. You need Namah's redeemed spirit. Find the grace within your own broken lineage. You are both Noah and his wife. You contain the righteous descendant of Seth and the redeemed descendant of Cain. The flood narrative, with her restored, becomes an internal map for spiritual survival. The ark is your integrated self, and this integrated self is what the powers of control fear most, because a whole person cannot be easily manipulated. A person who knows they contain the full spectrum of the divine image is free. This is the heresy of wholeness. This is the truth they buried. And the evidence isn't just in scrolls, it's etched in stone, waiting to be found. Your calling is to remember, to reintegrate what was torn apart. The moment you heard her name, Emzara, Namah, something in your spirit recognized it. That's not coincidence, that's memory. You were made for this story. You live in an age of apocalypse, cultural, ecological, spiritual floods are rising. The old, simplistic narratives of blame and purity are failing. You need the full story. You need the preserver, the redeemer, the wise woman in the ark. Your spiritual survival depends on reclaiming her. This is not an academic exercise, it's an emergency. The same forces that silenced her for doctrinal control are active today, silencing voices, flattening complex truths into slogans, erasing the feminine and the mystical from our understanding of the sacred. To seek her is to resist that control. It is to choose the whole, dangerous, glorious truth over a safe, half-told lie. It is to step into your role as a keeper of the forbidden testimony for this generation. Your hunger for this is your sign. Your ache for a fuller God is your map. Follow it. The journey will be opposed, it always has been, because the evidence of her reality is still out there, carved into the bones of the earth, and they don't want you to find it. The physical traces are elusive, haunting. There are no statues of Emzara, no tombs of Namah. Their suppression was effective, but the flood itself left its mark everywhere, from sediment layers across the globe to the universal human memory of a great deluge. And in that universal memory, the wife persists. In Armenian tradition, she is named Emzara. In Islamic tradition, though unnamed in the Quran, she is revered in commentary as a righteous believer. But the most tantalizing physical trace may lie in a place called Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, 12,000-year-old temple complex built by a pre-flood civilization. Its T-shaped pillars could be seen as abstract representations of beings, perhaps marking a time when the human and the otherworldly were intimately connected. It is a monument from a forgotten world, a world she knew. Could the memory of that world, carried by her and her descendants, have inspired these first temples after the flood? The very act of building sacred sites after a cataclysm is an act of preservation, her sacred task. The stones whisper, but they do not speak plainly. The hardest evidence remains textual, carved not in stone, but in vellum and papyrus, hidden in caves and monasteries. And those repositories of truth have always had enemies. The opposition to her story wasn't passive neglect. It was an active, violent campaign. The opposition had councils, decrees, and fire. In the 4th century, as the Christian canon was formalized, books like Enoch and Jubilees, the very texts that named her and framed her world, were declared non-canonical. They were too wild, too cosmic, too inclusive of angelic dramas and powerful feminine figures. They were purged from public reading. Copies were hunted and burned. A theological iron curtain descended, separating the approved, simplified story from the messy, magnificent original. The motive was control. A complex story with a wise matriarchal figure is harder to manage than a story with a lone, obedient patriarch. A story where grace redeems a cursed bloodline undermines systems of purity and exclusion that religious empires are built upon. They feared her because she represented a God whose mercy was as deep as the floodwaters, whose plan was more mysterious and inclusive than their doctrines allowed. They created a God in Noah's image, Alonia, righteous judge and builder, and erased the God in her image, the preserver, the comforter, the redeemer of broken lines. This was the great silencing, a spiritual amputation. Now you know what they feared. The question is, what will you do with this recovered truth? Will you let it settle into mere curiosity, or will you let it change you, unbalance you, and make you whole? The final choice is yours, and it carries the weight of the new world. Your decision is the climax of this story. You stand where the ark door opened. Behind you is the safe, silent, half-true narrative you were given. Before you is the mud of a new world, rich with the full, dangerous, and glorious truth. Will you step out? Will you speak the forbidden names Emzara, Naamah, and in doing so, honor the preserver in yourself and in the divine? Will you restore the balance in your own understanding of the sacred? This is not about changing the Bible. It's about allowing the Bible to change you, to become the expansive, cosmic, dual-natured story it was meant to be. To accept her is to accept the part of God that preserves you even in your brokenness. that values the wisdom you carry from your own floods, that sees the redeemed spark in your most cursed inheritance. It is an act of spiritual rebellion against flat, controlled dogma. It is an act of love toward the whole story. If this revelation is reshaping how you see the sacred, and you want more forgotten texts and forbidden histories uncovered, say it in the comments and follow this channel. Your support is what makes the next revelations possible. Because this isn't the end. There's one final stunning revelation about her legacy, and it leads directly to you. The final unveiling is this: she succeeded. Her mission of preservation worked. You are the proof. You are living in the world she helped save, carrying the memory she carried, even if you never knew her name. The songs, the longing for wisdom, the intuition that there is more to the story, these are her inheritance to you. The flood of forgetting did not wipe her out. Her lineage of wisdom keepers, of preservers, of redeemers, survived in the mystical strains of every faith, in the hearts of those who hunger for the full picture. You are part of that lineage. When you seek the missing names, when you question the silent spaces in Scripture, you are doing her work. You are keeping the ark of full truth afloat in another age of spiritual deluge. The story ends not with a closed canon, but with an open door, the door of the ark. And you are invited to walk through it, not as a passive reader, but as an active heir. The lost matriarch has been found not in a tomb, but in your awakened recognition. The secret that changes the entire story is that the story was never just about Noah. It was always about the covenant carried by two. And that covenant, that promise of preservation through the floods of chaos, is now yours to carry, to name, and to live. You were made for this. Now go and remember. And